the work has continued looking at insulin, its effects pathogenically or harmfully on the body, and also other things that insulin influences, like the production of ketones and how ketones act as their own signaling molecules, not just as a nutrient source, but actually telling cells to do something. And just to state that another way, because it is unique, where these are not just nutrients. Ketones have a caloric value similar to about glucose, actually, but they also have signaling that is very unique. They almost act like a hormone. Now, they're not, but they kind of act like it. Too many people don't realize that hyperinsulinemia is a fundamental aspect of insulin resistance, that they'll hear me or you or anyone else talk about insulin resistance, and that immediately evokes this idea of it's a state in the body where the hormone insulin isn't working well. That's true, but it doesn't stop there. Insulin resistance is a coin. And one side of the coin is the fact that the hormone insulin isn't working the same way that it used to at some cells of the body. In other words, some of the body's cells are in fact insulin resistant, like muscle cells or fat cells, but other cells of the body are perfectly insulin sensitive or have some mix of insulin sensitivity, like liver cells or gonads, like ovaries in particular. And that all becomes relevant when we flip the coin over, this coin that I'm calling insulin resistance. The other side of the coin is the hyperinsulinemia. There is no such thing as insulin resistance without hyperinsulinemia. That's very important because there are some instances called physiological insulin resistance, where the body has become insulin resistant to serve a valuable purpose. And overwhelmingly, that's growth. And that's why you only have physiological insulin resistance in two situations, pregnancy and puberty, because those are the two periods of rampant growth in a human, in the adolescent or in the adult female, of course. But even still, it's rampant growth, and the insulin resistance and the connected hyperinsulinemia help to fuel this selective growth in the adolescent or the pregnant woman. But regardless, whether it's harmful insulin resistance, like I study in my lab, the kind that's connected to Alzheimer's, et cetera, or whether it's physiological insulin resistance, when the body's become insulin resistant for a period of time on purpose, it still is both of these aspects. Its insulin is altered in how it's working, and blood insulin levels are elevated. In other words, hyperinsulinemia. And a perfect example of this, it's to look at the two most common forms of infertility in males and females. Specifically, I mean erectile dysfunction and polycystic ovary syndrome, respectively. And in erectile dysfunction, it's a problem of the insulin resistance part of this coin, side of the coin, which is that insulin isn't able to promote sufficient vasodilation in the man anymore. And so not only does he have probably elevated blood pressure, but if you can't dilate blood vessels, you don't have normal erectile function. And thus it's the insulin resistance that's contributing to the male form of infertility, the most common. In stark contrast, in the female, it's not the problem of compromised insulin signaling. It's more a problem of the hyperinsulinemia, because at her ovaries, she has cells in her ovaries that are capable of rapidly converting testosterone into estrogens. And that's a little known fact. All estrogens were once testosterone, and the ovaries convert that over very, very well at a much higher rate than the testes do in men. However, insulin inhibits that conversion. And so as she's insulin resistant and her insulin levels are higher, that has a specific effect at the ovaries, where it's the elevated insulin, not the insulin resistance per se, that is preventing her ovaries from converting the testosterone into estrogens at a high enough amount. Now her testosterone's too high, her estrogens are too low, and then she has polycystic ovary syndrome. She isn't ovulating, she may have more coarse body hair, and so on.
Annotated and summarized, easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points.